You are listening to the Keeping It Juicy podcast.
Your main squeeze in nutrition.
Don't forget to subscribe so you can join us every Tuesday for a brand new episode.
Also, don't forget to add us on Instagram and Facebook at Keeping It Juicy Podcast. All right, guys, welcome to episode 87. What's the tea? And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But first, let's go into our new nutrition in the news.
So, sorry, it's not really nutrition, but it's related to COVID, which is still happening, people. I mean, I know it doesn't really feel like it, but it's still alive and well. And it's also about health disparities, which we've been touching upon that in the last couple episodes and different parts of it. So it's very relevant right now. So the article will be attached in the show notes, but I want to discuss the article is basically looking at the current situation of COVID in the United States, and then there's a section on childhood inflammatory illness tied to COVID-19 disproportionately impacts people of color. So we've talked about health disparities in the past, how it relates to COVID, but now we're adding another layer into it, which is children and inflammatory illness. So let's dive into that. The article says that hundreds of kids in the US have become sick with inflammatory syndrome tied to COVID-19, and most of them have landed in intensive care units of hospitals, and this report came from the CDC. This mysterious inflammatory syndrome tied to COVID-19, which was actually first identified in May, has impacted people of color more so than any other children, according to the CDC report. As of July 29th, a total of 570 individuals have come down with the illness, dubbed a multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children, which is abbreviated MIS-C. So we'll be referring to it as that. The patients ranged in age from 2 weeks old to 20 years old. More than 55% were male, and about 40% were Hispanic Latino, 33% were non-Hispanic Black, and 13% were non-Hispanic white. So way more than half have not been white, basically. Symptoms of the MIS-C can vary, but they tend to be similar to those found in Kawasaki disease, a rare childhood illness that causes inflammation in blood vessel walls, and in serious cases can cause heart damage. While young kids tend to show symptoms that more classically resemble Kawasaki, teens and young adults of a more overwhelming inflammatory response involving their heart and other organs have been seen as well. So according to this new CDC report, about 2/3 of the patients had no pre-existing underlying medical conditions, but about 25% were considered obese. Minorities tend to have higher obesity rates anyways. So that's part of this whole systemic racism issue as well. So it's not that like, oh yeah, they were just obese, so that's why they got it. It's like, okay, well, why are they more susceptible to be obese in the first place? That's another big question that we need to be asking. And of these patients, more than 63% had to be admitted to the ICU. The CDC researchers found that the most common symptoms reported by the 570 individuals were abdominal pain, vomiting, skin rash, diarrhea, hypotension, and bloodshot eyes. For most of the patients, illness involved 4 or more organ systems, especially the heart. Of all of the 565 patients tested positive for COVID-19, 10 of them have died.
I was just about to say, damn.
Yeah.
I've always I've always have been under the impression that it has been affecting minority populations more so than the white population, and that's been going on for a little bit anyways. But
Right.
another thing is there's a lot of factors that come into that that do contribute to the fact that it does affect minority people as well. It also depends on where they live, the socioeconomic status, and a multitude of other things, which we did talk about in our previous episode, that is gonna come out in this way, which is very unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
I just, I don't
I mean,
know.
this whole COVID thing, at first it didn't affect kids, and
Hmm.
since day one, the research has been so all over the place. And in reality, research is always all over the place. It's just the general public is more involved now than ever because
Right.
we're all being affected by it in some way, shape, or form.
Hmm.
So we're seeing the scientific method unfold in front of our eyes, which we're not used to.
Right.
That's another layer to all of this, but just another thing to think about, another thing to be aware of, another thing to kind of
Hmm.
keep your eyes on and see what happens, and yeah, just be aware. So now we'll dive into the bulk of our episode. What's the tea? So tea is actually one of the most popular beverages consumed worldwide. Tea traditionally comes from the plant Camellia sinensis, which is consumed in different parts of the world as green, black, or oolong tea. Among these, however, the significant effects on human health have been observed with the consumption of green tea primarily. So we're going to dive into that one first.
Right. And green tea is actually one of my favorite teas. And for a while, um, there was a lot of misconception with green tea because for a while, before we go into the literature behind it, I kept seeing green tea pills or other stuff with fat loss, which is mm, we'll go into that, but that's just another way that marketing takes a plant and makes it big. Anyways, so we have green tea. The health benefits of green tea for a wide variety of ailments, and that includes cancer, heart disease, and liver disease, were reported. So the health promoting effects of green tea are mainly attributed to its polyphenol content. If you guys are already familiar with that, it talks about flavonols and flavonols, which represent about 30% of the fresh leaf dry weight. So there is evidence from in vitro and animal studies on the underlying mechanisms of green tea catechins and their biological actions. There were a lot of major headlines that we see pretty frequently about green tea, which are basically about human studies on using green tea catechins to treat metabolic syndrome, which we have an episode on that. Just go back some episodes, such as obesity, type 2 diabetes, and cardiovascular risk factors. There is long-term consumption of tea catechins could be beneficial against high fat diet-induced obesity and type 2 diabetes and could reduce the overall risk of coronary disease. Now, here are a few benefits we don't hear too often about green tea. So, the effectiveness of green tea in treating any type of diarrhea and typhoid has been known in Asia since apparently ancient times. And green tea catechins have an inhibitory effect on the Helicobacter pylori infection. So effects of green tea against the influenza virus, especially in its early stage, as well as against the herpes simplex virus, have also been demonstrated. Furthermore, it has been observed that adenovirus infection is inhibited in vitro by green tea catechins. So there's a lot of things going on here.
Right. There's so many studies on green tea. The systematic review attached in the show notes looked at like 150 different green tea studies, and I can
Hmm.
almost promise you that there's more than that.
Hmm.
So there's a huge interest in green tea, and we'll go into more green tea in a little bit, but are there any downsides to drinking green tea? Everything in moderation, but there actually can be some harmful effects of over tea consumption, green or black, actually, due to three main factors. So the first one is just caffeine content. If you're sensitive to caffeine, this could not go well for you. You can go overboard with caffeine in any form, whether it's from energy drinks, coffee, green tea, black tea, anything. So, something to be mindful. And then, actually, a kind of risk with any tea is actually the presence of aluminum, and that comes from the growing process. And then the effects of tea polyphenols and iron availability. So, we'll go over that in a little bit as well. So, green tea should not be taken or drank in excess by patients suffering from heart conditions or major cardiovascular problems. That's really tied into that caffeine content. And then it's also advised that pregnant and breastfeeding women should drink no more than 1 or 2 cups per day. Again, basically, the caffeine content can cause an increase in heart rhythm. And it's also important to control green tea consumption and some drug interactions, basically because of caffeine's diuretic effect. And then some studies have revealed the capacity of tea plants to accumulate high levels of aluminum. And this aspect is important for patients with renal failure because aluminum can be accumulated within the body, resulting in neurological diseases, and therefore is necessary to control the intake of food with high amounts of this metal. So, something to think about. Tea doesn't naturally have aluminum in it, but it's just how it's grown. Sometimes it can accumulate, and that comes down to sourcing and where you're getting your products from. Because, again, remember, um, herbs, supplements, tea is in this category too, is not regulated by the FDA, so you don't know what's in it or what you're getting. Additionally, green tea catechins can have an affinity for iron, and green tea infusions can cause a significant decrease of the iron bioavailability from the diet. We'll go over that a little bit more when we come to the drug supplement and drug interactions. And then it can also inhibit with blood thinners, again, which we'll get a little bit later in with the episode.
So this next tea that we're going to go into is probably one of the most popular teas right after green tea, and that is black tea. So although green tea leaves contain more catechins than black tea leaves, which undergo oxidation during manufacturing, black tea leaves contain more complex therobigens and theaflavins. Consumption of flavonoids could lower the risk of coronary heart disease via a number of mechanisms. Firstly, the antioxidant capacity of flavonoids may improve the endothelial function by lowering that oxidative stress. Better endothelial function impacts on the vasomotor tone, the platelet activity, the leukocyte adhesion, and vascular smooth muscle cell function. So human studies have actually shown that black tea flavonoids improve coronary circulation and just improve that endothelial function that we're talking about. Secondly, tea flavonoids have also been shown to reduce LDL, so that's the bad cholesterol that we've talked about before, by about 11.1%. So that's a pretty significant amount. And thirdly, in vitro and animal studies have revealed effects that go beyond just that antioxidant capacity. So, for example, reduced expression of endothelial adhesion molecules, stimulation of an anti-inflammatory response, and gene expression that favors improved smooth muscle function. So, turning to the role of flavonoids in cancer, free radical activity seems to increase the number of DNA mutations, so basically an early stage in cancer pathogenesis. And antioxidants are known to protect DNA and cell membranes from oxidation, and this has led to an emphasis on antioxidant-rich foods in public health nutrition overall.
So, now are there any issues with black tea? It has been suggested that phenolic compounds in black tea could have an adverse effect on iron uptake in the diet, kind of similar to green tea, particularly in vulnerable groups such as children, elderly, pregnant women, and those with low iron stores. A systematic review described 35 studies found while tea drinking limited the absorption of non-heme iron from the diet. There was insufficient evidence to conclude what effect this would have on indicators of overall iron. So whether or not milk was added to the black tea actually made little difference on the findings, because it is important to remember like how tea is normally drank. I feel like green tea might have honey and lemon in it traditionally. You don't put green tea with milk quite as often, but black tea is traditionally served with milk more often than not. So important to consider those variables as well. But it was suggested that healthy people with a minimal risk of iron deficiency had no cause to restrict tea consumption, while for groups that had risk of iron deficiency, tea drinking should be avoided at meal times. And it also noted that especially if you're vegan, so the black tea, it really only had an effect on the non-heme iron, and non-heme iron is more common in vegan diets, whereas the heme iron is, animal-based sources. So non-heme iron is already less bioavailable. Why would you want to inhibit that absorption even more with the tea? It could cause less absorption overall. And it says to help combat this, vitamin C is helps absorb iron. So add vitamin C with your meal or diet if you want to increase the bioavailability of your iron. And then, as mentioned with green tea, similar caffeine concerns exist for black tea as well.
And then we have our very popular teas, and that is our weight loss teas, which, oh my God, they're advertised
They're
everywhere.
everywhere.
You're scrolling through Instagram, they like creep up on you. Like someone from work is probably doing this and someone else is probably selling it. So these are the weight loss teas. So tea has become very remarkable for this. And we've all seen different weight loss teas on the market, especially Teami. I'm looking at you. So
Which one?
how Teami, so Teami.
I haven't seen much of that one.
They're everywhere, and now they're trying to sell masks on top of the detox teas. It's the funniest thing ever.
Multi-purpose company, we do it all.
So, anyways, however, scientific research on these individual and specific tea companies are very scarce. Which, are you surprised? So instead, we are just going to go over the common ingredients and inherent side effects that you're going to find. So green tea is a common ingredient in weight loss teas. I told you this was coming in back. It is suggested that green tea improves metabolism due to caffeine content and the catechins. Dandelion is also commonly found in weight loss teas. That's because dandelion is a diuretic, which means it just makes you pee more, which could potentially dehydrate you or help with the bloat in general. And it just really depends on what's going on, but it will help you lose weight simply by making you pee, not necessarily losing fat. Obviously, the tea is common for natural competitors to take to help lean out for a show. So I've heard of dandelion being used for that function multiple times.
Mm-hmm. And the point of that is it's not permanent. The minute you drink water, it's gonna come back, which is not like that's normal, but it's not really gonna help you lose permanent weight. And what frustrates me too is, I mean, caffeine gets a huge reputation for helping with weight loss. And that's only because one, caffeine gives you more energy to like do more things. So obviously if you do more things, you're just going to burn more calories through the day. And also it's an appetite suppressant. So have you ever like drank so much coffee that you forget to eat for a couple hours?
Mm-hmm.
So that combination is what can produce weight loss. Not the caffeine compound itself is like making your body any more efficient at fat burning or anything like that. But let's go into some of the risks associated with these weight loss teas. So as mentioned, dehydration is possible because of the diuretic effect of many of these different teas. Dehydration can result in diarrhea, which will actually result in more weight loss as well. And then these teas also have a laxative effect, which can result in dependency. So in this scenario, if you are having chronic movements and whatnot because of dependency, that can result in reduced potassium levels, which is very dangerous for people with heart problems. It's also very important to remember that these teas are not controlled by any regulatory agencies, such as the FDA, like we mentioned before. So you're not 100% sure what you're getting. You could be getting dirt from someone's yard, or you could be getting a banned substance. I don't know. So any teas, but especially these blends that say like proprietary blends, may interact with someone's medication. Blends can be dangerous just because sometimes the individual doses and ingredients are not listed. It'll just say proprietary blend, I don't know, 20 micrograms or something. And then it might even give you a list of what's in that proprietary blend, but you don't know in what concentration. So that could be very bad if you're on multiple medications and there's some of these interactions. And again, these blends could contain anywhere from, I don't know, 20 or 2 to 20 different teas. And depending on your medications, this could cause serious and potentially deadly results depending on what you're taking and how much of it you're taking. But sometimes you don't know because it's not listed because it's proprietary.
I like those people off. People never think it's a bad thing. They're like, oh, it must be good.
Right, right. They must have like formulated this in their lab and it's like their secret formula. But it's like, no, they only put proprietary so they can put the cheapest ingredients in the most and, you know,
Right.
not tell you what's in there.
So, speaking of which, next we're gonna mention a few very common tea ingredients and drug interactions, but there are hundreds, if not thousands, actually. So the first one is ginseng. I'm sure you guys are very aware of this. And there is a long-term use of American ginseng, and that may actually decrease, the long-term use of ginseng may actually decrease the effectiveness of warfarin, which is a blood thinner. So be careful if you're on warfarin, and it can increase the risk for a blood clot. So that's not something you'd want to fuck around with. So in general, ginseng or ginseng containing herbal tea should not be used with anticoagulants at all. Ask your doctor about this interaction. Ginseng may also affect blood pressure treatments and diabetic medications like insulin or oral hypoglycemics.
Right. And, ginseng over the years has become known as a health food. And
Mm-hmm.
people say, like, oh my gosh, it's going to be so good for me. But it's not good for everybody,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you're on warfarin.
Mm-hmm.
So the Holy Grail green tea is not so innocent. It does some things too. So dried green tea leaves contain vitamin K, which can increase blood clotting. So large amounts of vitamin K can actually interfere with the activity of some blood thinners like warfarin. A substantial decrease in the INR, which is a measure that looks at the blood's ability to clot, has been reported in a patient treated with warfarin after he began consuming large quantities, which was about half a gallon to a gallon of green tea per day. That's quite a lot. But at the same time, we hear people drinking, a gallon of water per day. I could easily see,
Yeah.
we sell those gallons of like lemon green tea. I could see someone drinking half of that in a day
I
because
even
they don't like water.
I even see people buy like the whole like 30 pack of those Lipton green teas from Sam's Club or Walmart and just chug on that all day long. So
Right,
that can
exactly.
easily be attainable.
Right. Half a gallon of green tea per day, especially if it's coming from, those Lipton ones. Like I see those
Right.
all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
It's believable. It's honestly it's not that far off.
Mm-hmm.
So it is suggested if you are on warfarin, you should probably avoid large amounts of green tea as it can interfere with the effectiveness of warfarin.
Mm-hmm. So this last one we're going to talk about is echinacea. So echinacea has been used to stimulate the immune system, and it's most commonly used in treatment of the common cold. I'm sure you've already seen it, echinacea in a couple of cough lozenges already. So most echinacea drug interactions are typically not serious. However, it can affect blood levels of drugs like tizanidines or Xanaflex, a muscle relaxant, or Razagilan, which is Azilect, and that's actually used in Parkinson's disease. Echinacea can slow the breakdown or metabolism of caffeine in your body and could lead to side effects such as jitteriness, headache, or insomnia. And echinacea may also change how the body metabolizes many drugs that go through the liver. So there are somewhat complicated interactions that can lead to side effects or reduce effectiveness of your medication. So always check in with your local pharmacist.
Mm-hmm. And I just think the main message with all of these supplement or drug interactions is
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of them do something, and a lot of drugs are made to mimic like
Mm-hmm.
what a plant did or does.
Mm-hmm.
So they interact with each other within your body. So
Right.
just got to be careful.
There's a reason why a lot of pharmacists, at least I know a couple of pharmacists, they study botany.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
So
Right. It's like, go figure. But when you think about
Right.
it, like almost all of our drugs come from a plant extract, or they're formulated to mimic the chemical structure of a plant compound. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not that far off the wall. So in reality, some of these herbs can have those properties,
Mm-hmm.
but the drug is obviously more concentrated.
Right.
But let us know what you think. Let us know
Mm-hmm.
your favorite tea, or if there's other ones that you want us to touch on. There are so many different teas out there.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way you can cover them all in just one episode. So
Right.
hope you learned something about teas in general, and just kind of proceeding with caution on some of them if
Mm-hmm.
you're on certain medications. But we will close out with our social media shout out of the week. It goes to Fully Filled Nutrition, and she is a strong supporter of, the whole non-diet movement. She calls herself a non-diet RD, and she's also a yoga teacher. She posts really nice, informative graphics about breaking free of the diet mentality, and they're just really well written and motivational and uplifting. So definitely check out her page. We
Mm-hmm.
appreciate it, and thank you for your support.
Yeah, thank you so much. And if you want to be our next social media shout out, remember, like a shit, comment on shit, and send us shit.
That's it.
And yeah, and we'll notice you.
Yes.
Also, before we actually close out the episode, if any of you guys have any internship horror stories, which I'm sure we all do from our dietetic internship, please feel free to DM us or send us an email, because we have an episode coming up which is going to be all about the fun things that we went through in our internship. So definitely send us a little something.
Yeah, definitely do that. That's an upcoming episode, and we can feature you, share your story. You can actually hop on the podcast if you'd like. So
Right.
let us know.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, want to close us out?
Oh God. Okay. The same old usual. I hope it's not redundant. But I mean, COVID is still happening. Don't touch anybody. Don't let anybody touch you. 6 feet social distance, all that good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
All right, guys, we will see you next week. Catch you next time.
bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to the Keeping It Juicy podcast.
Your main squeeze in nutrition.
Don't forget to subscribe so you can join us every Tuesday for a brand new episode.
Also, you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Keeping It Juicy Podcast.
We'd love to hear from you, so please leave us a review
5 stars, no less.
on whatever platform you're listening to, or send us an email at keepingitjuicypodcast@gmail.com.
Or if you have any topics you'd like for us to touch upon, shoot us an email. Until next time, don't do anything that I wouldn't do. There is evidence from in vitro in animal studies on underlying mechanisms of green tea. I'm just going to put them into